Hello and welcome to my kitchen. Today I'm going to make my version of shepherd's pie. Now there's a little bit of debate behind shepherd's pie. Some say it is cooked without a base, while others say with a base. Now my version has a base, and I make a base for two reasons. One is that it's a lot nicer to serve, and the other is it's filling. So what we need to do is a pastry base. I'm making a short crust pastry base, which I'll show you how to make that, and then I'll make the actual pie mixture itself, and then we make mashed potatoes to place it on the top. Now the very first thing you've got to start is to put your potatoes on to boil. Now I'm using the red potatoes because I find that they're a lot nicer to mash, they're fluffier and they're not as waxy. Now for a dish about this big, which is 10 by 8 and by 2 inches, I'd need about 8 to 10 potatoes. Now if you do have a little bit of potatoes left over, mashed potatoes left over, that's okay, you can use it for something else. I tend to make cheese croquettes with my leftover potatoes. But anyway, now I've already prepared my potatoes. I've chopped them up and I've popped them in a pot, small cubes, and I'm going to bring that to the boil, and then I'm going to have that boil for about 15 to 20 minutes, just until it's nice and tender. So I'll get onto that first. Now the first thing we'll need to do is to make our pastry. Now I'll be making a short crust pastry, and what you'll need for that, look, the rule with short crust pastry is the amount of flour you use, say you're using 200 grams, you will then have to use 100 grams of butter. Now I'm going to use 300 grams. So I'll be needing 150 grams of butter, nice cold butter from the fridge. The flour I'm using is double O, and I have my 300 grams. The other thing I find very useful is I use my blender to blend it up, and I'll show you what I mean. Okay, what we need to begin with is make a short crust pastry base. What I use is double O flour, and I'm going to be using 300 grams, and I'm going to use my blender. So all set up, we pop our flour into the blender, to that I'll add a little bit of salt, just a little bit, and I have 150 grams of unsalted butter. Make sure you get it from the fridge, it'll be too warm. So we're going to pulse it, and you'll also need some milk. Add some butter, and we're going to get it to like a crumbly biscuit texture. Yeah, that's great. It's nice and crumbly. Now what we're going to do is just add a little bit of milk to it. I've got about 3 tablespoons. So we'll add. That's exactly what I want. See how it's come nice and it's coming together? Now you don't want to overwork it, so the next thing we need to do is get a little bit of Glad wrap and just put it together. And I'm going to have to put it into the fridge for a little while to let it relax. So I'll just take the blade out and get my overturn it this way. Just show you, we got to be able to do is just squeeze it together. Get it all together. Make sure your surface is nice and clean. That's going to be a really nice buttery short crust pastry. Just the way I like it. Just the way Grace likes it. Little bit of Glad wrap. I like to sort of form it into a bit of the shape that I'm going to roll it out into. Okay, wrap it up nice and tightly. Now pop that in the fridge, and it needs to stay in there no less than a half an hour. If you could make it the day before would be even better, but I just wanted to show you how I make it. Okay, we'll come back and I'll show you how to make the filling to my shepherd's pie. Now we'll need 1 kilo of mince. I have beef mince. We will need 1 large onion diced up into little pieces. 1 carrot just chopped into little pieces, tiny little squares. 1 cup of frozen peas. 2 large cloves of garlic, minced. 1/2 cup of parsley, just chopped up nice and finely. 2 cups of shredded tasty cheese. We're also needing some thyme. I like to use the fresh thyme. 1 tablespoon of Worcestershire sauce, salt and pepper, and about 1/4 teaspoon of chilli powder. You'll need 2 to 3 tablespoons of plain flour and about 500 grams. This is a litre, so you probably need about 500 grams to maybe 600 grams of beef stock. Okay. Hi, now what we need to do is put some oil into a frying pan. And what we're going to do is cook the mince in batches. The reason why we do that is so it doesn't braise and it browns nicely. So I'll be doing it in small batches. Break it up in little pieces. To that I'll add some salt and pepper. Salt, pepper. And some salt. Okay, what we do is we cook it in little batches. Now we'll come back to that in a moment. Okay, this is the type of, this is what we're looking for. We want it to get to this stage, where it's nice and brown. And then we'll take it off the stove and transfer it into another bowl. Now I'm going to repeat that process until I've finished cooking all of the mince, and my potatoes have finished boiling, so I've just turned that off. So we'll see you again shortly. We've cooked all of our mince and we've put it aside. Now the next step, put a little bit of oil in the pan and we cook our onion. I'll let that soften. Okay, once that's cooked down and softened, we'll add our garlic. Add our carrot. Now I'm just going to let that cook down a little bit. soften. It's cooked for about 2 minutes, just enough to soften. Now to that we'll add the meat back to it. Take the mince and put it back. Stir that through. Okay, to that we'll add our spices. So we're going to have a little bit of chilli. So I'd say about a quarter of a teaspoon to a teaspoon, depending how much you like it spicy. We're going to add a couple of sprigs of thyme. I use the fresh thyme. And just sprinkle that around. And only about a quarter of a cup of the parsley, because we're going to use the other half, the potato mixture. So they just get high. Smells great. Now, to that we're going to add about a tablespoon of Worcestershire sauce. Get a little sprinkle over. Now, this isn't traditional, but I like to do it because I like to thicken up the mixture. Is I'm going to add some flour, and that'll give it a nice thick gravy consistency. So you've got to cook the flour out or else it tastes floury. So probably about a tablespoon to begin with. Make sure you cook it out, the flour out. Just fold it around. I'm going to add more flour to this because I think it needs it. So all up, probably about 2 tablespoons. Okay, that's been cooking for about 2 minutes, just cooking out the flour. Now, I'm going to add the stock. Now this is more like sides, but I'm thinking about 500 mils, which is half of this. And what will happen, it will start to thicken up. Just give the bottom a bit of a scrape. That's where all the flavour is. Just let that simmer for about 2 minutes. I'll also add some more salt and pepper. Okay, while that's simmering for a couple of minutes, I'm going to take the mashed potatoes, the potatoes, and I'm going to take them out to drain them and mash them. Okay, to mash the potatoes, we're going to use about 40 grams of butter. So we'll just place that inside, just chop it up. Okay, then we get our masher. We need a little bit of milk, about 40 mils to begin with, and start mashing like crazy. It's hard work. Okay, we've got it really nice and mashed up. So what I'm going to do is just add the remainder of the parsley. And I'm just going to stir that through. And I'm going to then put it aside. Okay, it's ready now. And the last thing we need to do is just add the peas. So we can turn it off pretty much and just add the peas and stir that through. Okay, now that's ready. What we're going to do now is make the pastry, roll the pastry out, put it in the bottom of the tray. Okay, now we're going to roll out our pastry to make the base. Okay, now what we're going to do is just roll out our pastry. What I do is I get a piece of baking paper rather than using flour. And I try and push it out to the shape I want. Because it's so buttery, it's going to crack. So it's a good idea just to push it out. Now, it's also a good idea to put your oven on. So I'm going to preheat the oven at 180. Put the other piece of paper on top. Get a rolling pin and start to roll it out. Now remember, it's going to be really hard to roll out because you've just taken it out of the fridge. That's okay, the more you work at it, it'll start moving. So I'm going to roll this out until I get it to the right shape and then I'll come back. Okay, so this is about, it's about 1.5 millimeters, maybe 2. Now what we're going to do is get our pan And I'm going to lightly grease it. Just a tiny bit of oil, just a tiny bit. With my fingers, I'm just going to rub it all. Because there's so much butter in the pastry, it won't stick, but just to be on the safe side, just want to make sure. Now we get our pastry. And pull the paper off. And I'm going to flip this over and push it in. I'm going to remove this paper. And just be a bit mindful you don't tear pastry too much. Make sure it's in place. Okay, so there's our pastry bottom. You just need to get a knife and trim. Just trim that off. Okay, and that's what you should end up with. Don't throw this out, we can use this again. So what I'm going to do with the paper that I used earlier, I'm going to use that to blind bake my pastry. Cover it over. Now you'll need something like some sort of weight. I've got these little cement balls and I'm just going to line the bottom and I'm going to bake that for about 18 to 20 minutes at 180 degrees. Okay, now that the hard work is done, all we need to do is assemble everything. We've got our pastry, so I'm just going to remove the weights. And just be very mindful not to burn yourself if you do. Just pop them back into the jar, move that aside. Your pastry should be nice and cooked. And with a large spoon, I'm just going to transfer everything into the pastry, the filling into the pastry. So we just pop everything. Smells amazing. And just move it into the corners. Make sure you get it right in, tuck it in really nice. Now I've just got one more procedure, and that is to put the mashed potatoes on top. Now make sure you leave the oven on at 180 degrees because we need to pop this back in for about 15 minutes. Everything's already cooked, but it's just to melt the cheese and give it a nice crusty top. Now if you do have any mashed potatoes left over, that's fine. You can use that for something else, like I might make some croquettes with it. So just push it out gently to the ends. Looks amazing so far. Cut it out nicely. Okay, and now we're just going to put some tasted cheese over the top. Okay. You could also sprinkle a little bit of Parmesan on top, but we like tasty cheese. Spread it out nicely. And that's what it should look like. Now I'm going to pop it back into the oven at 180 for about 15 minutes at the most, and until it's got a nice crust on top, and then we'll have a look at what it looks like then. So I'll see you then. Okay, now it's ready. Yum, smells amazing. Now, all we need to do is wait for about 10 minutes for it to cool down. So I'll let it rest for a moment and then I'll cut it open and I'll show you what it looks like. Okay, it's cooled down and now is the moment of truth. We're going to cut it and see how it came out. Now we tend to let it cool down so that when we do serve it, it doesn't tend to mush. So we're going to cut it this way first. Okay. It smells incredible. I'm going to go for this corner piece. Okay, let's look at this. What we're looking for is to make sure it doesn't all fall apart, everything's cooked, and let's have a taste. That's sensational. Now give it a go, try it. I just want to say that the original recipe, or the traditional recipe, is to be made with lamb mince, but I don't like lamb, I like beef. Okay, thank you for watching.
I've been sleeping